All right, some huge news today. Kyoji Horiguchi is going back to the UFC. About time. That's all I'm going to say. About time Kyoji Horiguchi is back in the UFC octagon. Long overdue, you know? This is something I've been pushing for a while at this point now. I think it's always made sense for Horiguchi to find his way back to the UFC, and I've always thought the UFC's relationship with Rizin hasn't been all that bad. So a couple years ago, or actually it's only a year ago now, when champion Pantoja was supposed to take on Steve Erceg, or before he had an opponent for UFC 301, I thought they were going to bring in Horiguchi, because at the time, the UFC was looking for challengers so desperately. I mean, guys, Steve Erceg's fighting in a main event next week in Mexico. His best win is still Matt Schnell. Again, credit to Erceg, he took Pantoja to the distance, to the wire, but Pantoja ultimately won. That's how far down they were looking down the rankings, though. I mean, Erceg was ranked 10 at the time, and he got a title shot. It made sense last year, I thought, for Rizin to let Horiguchi fight for the UFC, or the UFC to just sign him, and that's exactly what's happening now, and it makes all the sense in the world. Now, folks, before we get into this full breakdown in Kyoji Horiguchi's re-entry into the Ultimate Fighting Championship, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more MMA content here on the channel. Earlier this week, we posted our UFC London predictions. Obviously, Leon Edwards and Sean Brady in the main event over there. Okay, it's a great ad for the UFC, it really is. Now, originally, and I thought this is still happening, Pantoja Kai Kara France for the UFC Flyweight Championship. I don't think it is now. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know whether or not to trust these sources who, repeat the same thing over and over and over again. Pantoja says he did not sign a contract for Kai Kara France. He wants to fight Merab. Let's just be honest. Pantoja's not getting the fight against Merab. That's going to Sean O'Malley. That's another video in its own right. I don't know why that's happening. But anyways, well, money talks, I guess. Regardless, UFC 316 right now only has 2 fights. Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison. And Johnny Walker versus Asmat Murzakanov. That's a bad fight for Johnny Walker, I'm going to be honest. But there's supposed to be 3 title fights on this card in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center at UFC 316. Obviously, we expect the main event to be the rematch between Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili. I wonder how that one's going to go. And then I think there's going to be a flyweight co-main event, and then Pena Harrison will also be on the card. So we're looking at a 3 title fight card for this, pay-per-view in New Jersey. And I'm going to make the case that it should just be Kyoji Horiguchi. I think it should be Kyoji Horiguchi versus Pantoja. I know what you're thinking. Oh, we're just bringing in these Rizin guys to immediately fight Pantoja. I'll make the case, and I said this when Kaya Sakura was getting his title shot against Alexandre Pantoja, that Horiguchi was the most deserving guy to get this title fight. He is. I mean, Horiguchi at 125 pounds just doesn't lose. So, Rizin made a flyweight championship just for Horiguchi. Originally, he was supposed to take on Makoto Shinryu on the Bellator versus Rizin card. It was a no contest. The fight ended 25 seconds in. They ended up rescheduling the bout for their New Year's Eve card in 2023. Horiguchi wins by second round submission. He was already like a minus 800 favorite to win that fight. He goes and fights Sergio Pettis, gets his rematch, which everyone forgets, by the way. When Kyoji Horiguchi was on top of the world, he beat Kaya Sakura in the rematch at the end of 2020. He fights Sergio Pettis in Bellator at the Mohegan Sun, I believe, in when they were still doing no crowds. There might have been a crowd. I don't think there was a crowd. He's fighting Sergio Pettis. Kyoji Horiguchi's up 4 rounds to nothing. He's going to be up 4 rounds to nothing. He's winning the 4th round, and then all of a sudden Pettis hits him with the spinning back fist, and not to say Horiguchi hasn't been the same since. He just ran into Patchy Mix next, who, again, is another guy we can make a whole video about how he should be in the UFC as well. I think it's only a matter of time before the UFC signs Patchy Mix. Anyways, Horiguchi since went back to Rizin, won a fight, and really hasn't lost since. Got his get back against Sergio Pettis, and he just defended the Rizin Flyweight Championship on New Year's Eve, obviously last year. Defending the belt, he was like a minus 1,400 favorite, but obviously he retained the championship. Long overdue, right? Because you look at Horiguchi, former UFC name, and really was one of these guys that should have never left the UFC. Guys, Kyoji Horiguchi was in the UFC. He was 6-1 in the promotion, and his only loss was Mighty Mouse. Now, was Mighty Mouse on his way to a 50-45 decision at UFC 186? Yes, he was. And that was the fight where Mighty Mouse gets the armbar with 1 second left and forces the tap out of Horiguchi. And Horiguchi, sure, are his wins in the UFC the most impressive? He's 7-1, in the UFC. Not really. John De Los Reyes, Chico Camus. Ali Bagantinov's a good win. Bagantinov's another guy who challenged for the belt at one point in time. But then the UFC let go of him. And that was in 2017, 2016, where the UFC was going through their, we're just going to get rid of flyweight phase. Mighty Mouse beating everybody. Eventually 2 years later, they tried to get rid of it. Obviously, if Dillashaw went down to 25 and Beat Cejudo, the weight class would have been, over, obviously. But, shout out to Triple C saving the division. Now, Kyoji Horiguchi is more than deserving of this title shot. I think, personally, he's ran through a bunch of guys in Rizin. He does own a victory over Manel Kape. Now, that's all the way back in 2017, so that's 8 years ago now. Wow. 7 years ago, really. But Horiguchi's been great over there in Rizin. Again, the losses in Bellator are Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix. And then he lost to Kai Asakura in the first fight. Asakura knocked him out. What happened in the rematch? Koji Horiguchi got the knockout in the first round. Now, I think this is a much more, deserving, spot for a championship fight compared to Kai Kara-France, who shouldn't be anywhere near the belt. He's 25-11, and this is absolutely ridiculous. Guys, Kai Kara-France is coming off a Steve Erceg win, where it was great. Co-main event spot, UFC 305, picks up the knockout of Erceg, but that doesn't warrant a title shot. And I get it. A lot of people thought, myself included, he beat Amir Albazi. You look at what Brandon Moreno just did to Amir Albazi. Made him look like an amateur. Kai Kara-France is going to get a title fight after losing 2 out of his last 3 fights. It just can't happen. And 3 fights ago, that was for an interim championship against Brandon Moreno. I just don't understand. And also, we've seen this fight before. I get it was a while ago. It was on The Ultimate Fighter. But Pantoja's already beat Kai Kara-France. There's no need for this fight. The much better fight should be Kai Kara-France versus Manel Kape. And it writes itself, obviously. Hell, Manel Kape's post-fight interview on the Strickland Adesanya main card where he, used a slur. And, it was hilarious. I'm not gonna lie. And called out Kai Kara-France and his entire team. The story writes itself. It really does. Now, if you want to really book UFC 316, this is the card, and it's easy. And trust me, I'll talk about Manel Kape a little more in a second. But the card's really easy from here. You go main event, Merab O'Malley, even though I don't want to see it, nobody wants to see it, but I guess we're going to have to do it. Okay, that's the main event. Co-main event, Pantoja versus Kyoji Horiguchi, Juliana Pena, Kayla Harrison. We can do Colby Covington's rumored to fight on this fight card. Guys, I hate to say this might be Wonder Boy's last fight. I have a feeling they're going to do Wonder Boy and Colby, so put it on there. Colby needs a win. Wonder Boy's probably going to retire. I think this is how they'll do it. If not, Colby versus Ian Gary, but they'll probably just do Colby and Thompson. Because you can't really sell a Colby and Gary fight. You can, but Colby needs to win a fight eventually. So let's give Colby another 43-year-old. And I love Colby Covington. Anyways, that's your other fight. And then the first fight, the main card, easy Kai Kara-France, Manel Kape. It literally writes itself. It does. Now, if you want to wait till you go back to Australia for Kai Kara-France, sure. But if you do all these fights on one night at the Prudential Center, then literally everything just figures itself out. You get the next title challenger between the winner of Kape and Kai Kara-France, and then you get a champion between Pantoja, obviously, and Horiguchi. Now, Manel Kape's much more deserving of the title fight than Kai Kara-France is. He's won back-to-back fights. I put him in the main event, obviously, a couple weeks ago against Asu Almabayev. Got the third-round finish. Was in the flow state against Bruno Silva, getting the finish in that fight. Yeah, he lost to Muhammad Mokaev, which that's going to be a whole other discussion in its own right. Should Mokaev be in the UFC? Yeah, probably, but, it is what it is. And there's a couple other guys we can talk about, obviously, in the race for the championship. Obviously, they're all chasing Pantoja, who is just stacking up the wins at this point. And honestly, if you want to even make the case stronger for Horiguchi, because if the Kai Kara-France Pantoja's fight's not even on, then I guess you can say, oh, maybe Manel Kape deserves a title shot. Well, Horiguchi's beat Manel Kape, and Pantoja's already beat Manel Kape too. And I know, again, that was Kape's second fight in the UFC, and Horiguchi beat him 7 years ago. But it just makes sense. If you're able to give Kai Asakura an immediate title shot, why wouldn't you do that for Horiguchi? Horiguchi's resume is a lot better than Kai Asakura's. Let's just be honest, guys. Look at what Kai Asakura did prior to the UFC. These are good victories. I'm not going to lie to you, right? I mean, beating Juan Archuleta for the belt, that's great. But you compare who Horiguchi just beat in Rizin. And again, I think Archuleta's great, kind of. But you compare beating Juan Archuleta to beating Sergio Pettis. And I get it, Pettis has been losing fights, but still, that's a big victory for Horiguchi. And then Asakura was just on a 2-fight winning streak. I don't rate it all that much compared to what Horiguchi did. And you compare common opponents too. The guy that Kyoji Horiguchi beat on the Bellator vs. Rizin card, Hirosima Okigubu, Probably butchered that, I'm sorry. He beat him by decision on that card. Asakura 4 fights ago lost to him by decision in 2021. So it just makes sense. Again, Horiguchi's resume is so much better. Horiguchi has won the last fight compared to Asakura, and I get it. The UFC just really wanted a Japanese champion. They really wanted the following that Asakura brings in. I guess he's really popular on YouTube and whatnot. I have a Japanese friend who doesn't watch MMA, and he knows who Kai Asakura is, right? I mean, he's a big, big following, obviously, in Japan. It just makes sense. Why wouldn't you give the fight to Horiguchi? I get he doesn't have the following Asakura does, but you still get your Japanese champion, and you can still go to Japan, by the way, and do a fight card over there. It's easy. You just have Kai Asakura fight somebody in the top 15 of the rankings. I don't know who entirely you do that against. I mean, I guess Asakura, you want a fight that Asakura can actually win, but a guy that you actually need to, main event a card. I probably would do Tim Elliott. Probably. He's coming off a win over Sumidarji back in 2023. He hasn't lost in 2023? Seriously? Has he not? Anyways, that's probably what I would do. Elliott's main evented a card before. I think that's probably, if you want to go to Japan, you want to main event Asakura. You could have main event Horiguchi, but we kind of want him on the pay-per-view card. I just do Asakura versus Tim Elliott in the main event. I know that doesn't really sell that much, but you can make it a co-main. You can just put a stupid heavyweight fight in the main event. I'm serious. You could just do, off the top of my head, Derek Lewis versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. No, let that be the co-main. Yeah, let that be the co-main. Right? I mean, that's just what I would do for a UFC Japan fight card, which they've been talking about doing for forever, which who knows if they're actually going to do, because the UFC Qatar card was supposed to happen, and they moved it to the Apex. But hey, we're getting a UFC Azerbaijan card with Rafael Fiziev likely in the main event. I'll take it. New markets. But anyways, right, I mean, I think it just makes sense. You could also look at maybe Brandon Moreno fighting Kyoji Horiguchi right away. Obviously, he's fighting Steve Erceg next week. I'm going to spoil the prediction. I think we all think Brandon Moreno is going to beat Steve Erceg. Unless Erceg's able to knock him out, which is really hard to do. I think Moreno's going to win. So you could do Moreno versus Horiguchi, or you could do Moreno versus Asakura, but I don't think we want Asakura to fight a guy like Moreno next, because Asakura actually needs to win a fight. Now, there is a fighter that is getting forgotten about in all this. I'll be honest with you, and I actually forgot about him too. There is Brandon Royval when we talk about the top flyweights of the world. Brandon Royval is actually very... he deserves a title fight over Kai Kara-France. It's actually ridiculous. You know how many guys Kai Kara-France lost to? He's lost to Royval too, and it was Royval's second fight in the UFC. So, again, Royval's a lot more, warranting of a title shot. I know it would be his third opportunity at Pantoja, but guys, Brandon Royval in back-to-back fights, and he was going to try to do it against Manel Kape, obviously before he had to pull out due to injury, but Brandon Royval fought two guys nobody wants to fight at the top of the weight class. He beats Brandon Moreno in Mexico, and that was not a split decision. Royval easily won that fight. And another fight that should not have been a split decision, Brandon Royval beat Tetsuro Taira, the undefeated Japanese fighter. He beats him by split decision. Royval is kind of getting forgotten in the title picture. I know he's injured, so obviously he can't fight for the belt right now, but that's another guy we kind of have to consider, all right, well, Brandon Royval is still around as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces, obviously, to this flyweight division. If I'm going to match make all of it right now, all right, let's do, obviously, Horiguchi versus Pantoja. That's the fight that we all want to see, I think, for the belt. We'll just assume Moreno is going to be Erceg. But actually, I don't know if he really fits. We're going to obviously do Manel Kape versus Kai Kara-France. It's just the fight that makes sense. See, I don't really want to book. We can't do Moreno and Royval again, but they're ranked 1 and 2. There is Tetsuro Taira. Okay, well, let's just get Kai Asakura versus Tim Elliott out the way. We just need Kai Asakura to actually win a fight. And then we have to match make. We could just do Royval. Actually, you could do Royval Moreno too. Yeah. That's probably what you have to do. Yeah, I'd probably do Royval Moreno again. It's not what we want to do, but what else would you do in the weight class? You're not matching Moreno up against Tetsuro Taira. You're not matching him up against Alex Perez, who's injured right now. And then what, you're going to do Royval versus Albazi? How is Albazi still ranked 3rd? That's ridiculous. You're not going to do that fight. So yeah, I just do the rematch again between Manel Kape and Brandon Moreno. And boom! Everything figures itself out. But again, the biggest part of all of this is that Kyoji Horiguchi's back in the UFC. This is a guy with real knockout power at 125 pounds. He's an all-around great fighter, great striker. He can get the fight done on the feet as well. This is a great addition to the UFC, and it was really, honestly, now or never for Kyoji Horiguchi. 34 years of age. It needed to happen. He's still technically in his prime. And I don't think the UFC should wait at all for a title fight for him. I don't want to see him have to fight Manel Kape, because then you're eliminating a title challenger. I could see them doing Horiguchi versus Moreno and main eventing it in Japan, and then just having Kai Kara-France fight Pantoja, and then it's just they rebook Royval and Kape. But no, don't do that. Let's make this easy on ourselves. Just let Horiguchi fight for the belt. Again, the two fighters that kind of get stuck here are Moreno and Royval, but you already got your shot. Let's just be honest. They're both 0-5 combined against Pantoja. Moreno's lost 3 times, Royval's lost twice. As much as I'd like to see Royval get another title shot, he really would have to earn it. And sure, beating Moreno again would likely do it. So that's what I do. But Kyoji Horiguchi back in the UFC, a massive get for the promotion. And I'm so excited to see Horiguchi try to chase that 125-pound championship 10 years after his original title shot against Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. So folks, thank y'all for watching our quick breakdown of Kyoji Horiguchi's reemergence back into the Ultimate Fighting Championship. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy, and make sure to comment as well your thoughts on Kyoji Horiguchi coming back to the UFC. Folks, thank y'all for watching. Mamba forever.